with Nousha. I'm Nousha, a former climber of the corporate ladder turned lifestyle entrepreneur. Each week, I'll bring you an inspiring message to support you in designing and creating a vibrant, fulfilling life. Thank you for joining me today. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome. I'm Nousha. Very excited to be here with you today to talk about the topic of our spiritual health, more specifically, the concept that suffering is optional. Now, my intention is to illustrate the role of suffering in our lives as human beings, to share with you a couple of principles that I live by and 4 steps that I take to shift out of suffering. And as well, I'll include 6 resources to further support you. So the first time I heard the concept that suffering is optional, I was actually very irritated. It awakened me to how numbed I was and how I was living in the state of suffering and not knowing that it was optional until I awakened to the truth. And the truth is that as human beings, we experience ups, downs, pleasure, pain, grief, sorrow, joy, love, suffering. And these are the rainbow of emotions that we all experience. Now, unfortunately, sometimes we tend to stay in certain experiences that we don't enjoy and don't have the tools to get out of them. So it's a pleasure to share with you my own experience and some of the tools and practices that I use. And again, it's a choice. You know, suffering, if someone prefers to be in that state, it's okay. And also, if someone chooses to shift out of it, there are ways and tools to do that. Now, there is a man that I deeply admire, and his name is Viktor Frankl. And I want to make sure I get all his credentials right. He's an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist, as well as a Holocaust survivor. And he wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. And what he did is he chronicled his experiences as an Auschwitz concentration camp inmate during World War II. Now, the book is fascinating. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. You can find it at NoushaBehbahanian.com in the resources section. And you know, in my view, his circumstance was one of deep suffering. And yet he found some practices and tools that he shares in the book of how he moved beyond that and was obviously able to survive and write about it. And so he knew that suffering is optional. And he knew that if he stayed in his suffering, it would be the kiss of death. And so I highly recommend this book. It really opened my heart and my mind and my soul. And I hope you too enjoy it as much as I did. So now I'll share a few principles that I personally live by. And one of them is to own my soul's journey. And so what I mean by that is for me to own my experience, to embrace it, versus being a victim of it. And an example I have for that you're all familiar with if you've been listening to my podcast from the beginning is the story of my father being diagnosed with MS and, you know, having to have gone to the hospital and just some very extreme things that happened. And I remember, because it was an 8-year process of really healing for my father to get back to good health. And I remember as part of that 8 years, it was like I would be thinking, you know, like, why me? Why now? You know, he's so young. I'm so young. You know, these things should be happening later on in life. So why me? Why now? You know, why? All kinds of questions that were really not having me own the experience, but rather being a victim of it. And so now I see that there are no accidents. You know, at some level, my soul attracted that experience for the evolution of my soul. And you know, as Wayne Dyer says, he says we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so as a spiritual being, at some level, we have chosen all our experiences. And yet when we come and have the human experience, we can choose to resist these experiences for as long as we want. And I've learned, you know, through some really amazing teachers and world-class entrepreneurs like Richard Branson, Anthony Robbins, and one of the leaders in our profession, Eric Worre. They all had a very similar message at a conference that I was recently at, and that was every obstacle is an opportunity. And so this is what I mean by owning our soul's journey and really owning it and embracing it and not being a victim of it. So that's principle number one. Principle number two is the concept of resist nothing. So what I've learned is whatever I resist persists. And so it's important to recognize that, because eventually whatever we resist eventually shows up in our body. And disease, if we break up the word dis-ease, it's not feeling good in our body. And according to an excellent author, her name is Louise Hay, she has written a book called You Can Heal Your Life. And this book is just amazing in terms of really illustrating her own personal experience shifting out of cancer through just looking at her thoughts and shifting those thoughts. And her book actually shares different kinds of diseases and certain thought patterns that are connected to those diseases, and how we can shift the thought patterns to something more positive, and that can shift the chemistry in our bodies. And this has been proven on many, many different levels, that our thoughts create our reality, and that reality includes our physical reality and our health. So another really great book and great resource. And so I want to be clear, though, that there are certain circumstances that we go through that warrant for us to feel pain and suffering and sorrow and grief. And I think it's important, you know, it's important as part of the process to feel those things, because it's a sign that there must be some kind of a limiting belief that is out of alignment with who we really are. And this is how I have seen my pain and suffering, is that, okay, wait a minute, what is it that I am believing? What's that thought pattern? You know, going back to what Louise Hay is saying about shifting our mental thoughts. What is my thought pattern that's bringing this pain, and how can I shift it? So the faster we can recognize that we are in that state and embracing it and feeling it, then we can get into healing it. And as Oprah says, if you can feel it, then you can heal it. And that brings me to the 4 steps. So the first step is to awaken to it, is to acknowledge it. Step number 2 is to feel it, to embrace it. And this is often not the most enjoyable experience. However, it has to be done as part of the healing process. Step number 3 is to heal it. And there's another awesome spirit junkie. Her name is Gabby Bernstein, and she has authored this book, The Universe Has Your Back, and it has some excellent exercises that can support in really shifting the energies and supporting in the healing. And that brings me to step 4, which is to allow it to heal. And this is a step where we really give it up to something bigger. You know, your belief maybe in God, the universe, source, the divine, whatever your belief is, that there's something larger, to give it up to that so it can support in the healing. So that includes, you know, trusting and also appreciating that, wow, you know, you brought this to me so that I can see the contrast of what I do want and what I don't want. And so yeah, making the prayer of, I had X experience and what I now want is Y experience, and allowing it to shift in good time. And in my experience, as soon as I started to have thoughts like that and set an intention that I wanted to shift something, there were miracles that happened. There were resources, there were people, there was information that was given to me because this is the thought that I was vibrating, and the answers came. So our prayers are answered. It's just a matter of us awakening, setting the intention of what it is that we want to choose, what kind of experience we want to choose. So those are the 4 steps. And in terms of the 6 resources, I've shared 3 of them. So Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And we have You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, Gabby Bernstein's The Universe Has Your Back. And then I have 2 other resources that are excellent. And that is Power, Freedom, and Grace by Deepak Chopra, Living from the Source of Lasting Happiness. Excellent book. And Living Ecstasy by Satyen Raja. So I think that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that was 5. So the 6th book is by Wayne Dyer, and that is The Power of Intention, which is hugely important as well. So thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to share in this way. I'm so grateful for technology so that we can connect in these ways. And, further to that, would love to connect with you further on our Facebook group, Our Vibrant Living Community. As well, you can find more information on my website, NoushaBehbahanian.com. All of these books are found in the resources section for your convenience. And until next time, beautiful friends, be vibrant, be bright. It's your birthright. Now let's go out there and shine our light. Thank you for investing this time with me on the Vibrant Living with Nousha podcast. I'm so glad that you joined our conversation. If you would take 2 minutes to positively impact someone's life by sharing this episode, that would be wonderful. Please leave us a review by visiting iTunes. Let us know what you enjoy and what you'd like to see more of. It will support us on our journey to causing a worldwide epidemic of vibrant living. Until next time, be vibrant, be bright. It's your birthright. Now, let's go out there and shine our light.